Back in the project, this, as I mentioned, first app component here has this extra app because Angular CLI put this app there, because this is the root component being started in this main.ts file in the bootstrap method which loads up our overall application. So this is the root component holding other components. And throughout this module, you will see how we create several components and let them work together. But for now, I want to stick at this first app.component.ts file. In this file, you can see we got a TypeScript class, which of course gets compiled to JavaScript as all the TypeScript code does. And this class has a name of first app component. This class has a property, title, which is of type string and says, does that really work? We're exporting this class here to make it available outside of this file too. So this is a module. This is automatically transformed into a module which we can import using the import statement, like we're doing it here at the top of this file for the component metadata we're importing from the Angular 2 framework. That being said, that's a very important step. This component metadata, which you see attached right above this class. You can see that we have an @ sign at the beginning, which indicates that this is a TypeScript decorator, which allows us to easily add metadata to a class. Now, rightfully, you may ask, what is metadata? What's that? What does it do? Well, metadata is basically some additional information you attach to a class, which you can't or don't want to include in a class body, and which will tell JavaScript, or in the end Angular 2, what this class should be transformed to, or give it some additional information. Otherwise, this would be a plain normal class, and Angular 2 would not know that this is a component it should render to the screen, and so on. With the add component decorator, Angular 2 does know that, and it knows, okay, this is a normal class, and I will transform it into a component. I will use it like a component. Now, what makes up a component? Some of the things we define here in this component decorator. This component decorator takes a JavaScript object as an argument, as you can see, and then here we got 4 fields defined. Now, be aware that there are a lot of the other fields too, and you don't need all of the fields, all of the configuration for each component. It depends on what your component does, which dependencies or other things this component might have. And you will see them being added step by step throughout this course. This component here has a module ID, and I will come back to that in a second. It has a selector too, and this is the very important thing. This first app selector here. Now, what's that? What's this first app selector? This is the selector, the instruction. Angular 2 will search for in HTML code, and whenever it finds this instruction, this selector, it knows, okay, I should render this component in this place. Now, where does it search for it and where does it find it? Well, for this root component, which is started with the bootstrap command, it looks in this index.html file. And in this index.html file, you see this line here, first app, with the loading text between the opening and closing tag. Now, this clearly isn't the default HTML5 or HTML tag, right? There is no first app tag in HTML. Nonetheless, when loading the website, we're seeing this, does that really work, and nothing else, right? We're not seeing the loading text. Now, Angular 2 knows that this first app refers to this first app component here, because we're bootstrapping this application and passing this first app component. That's necessary for the startup of our application, and tells Angular 2, hey, look for this first app component in the index.html file. And it does look for it, and it does find it, because we have this tag here, and this tag matches this selector. That being said, this selector could be changed. It works like a CSS selector. So here we have just first app, and this would be similar to, let's say, h1. Now, h1 would select all h1 elements, and of course I'm not doing that here because I don't want to replace h1 elements, which is a default HTML tag, with my component, but I could do this. So back to this. I could also make this look like an attribute, like an HTML attribute. Now with this would no longer work with that code here, as I can show you if I restart my server, ngserve. And now if I reload my page, you're seeing this loading text, because now Angular 2 will no longer replace this first app selector here because it's not aware that it should. The selector is pointing to a different element. For example, the selector would now match a div which has first app attached to it like an HTML attribute. Now you see that doesn't really work here, because now this is matched as I replace the selector with an attribute selector. And again, I'm just using the normal CSS selector notation here. So nothing special. I'll change that back to tag selection so that again, I'll be able to swap out this first app selector here.